We have a lot of news to cover today, including a potential blockbuster trade brewing between the San Jose Sharks and the New York Rangers. We also have other updates of our NHL trade rumors, including the St. Louis Blues, the Boston Bruins, as well as Jacob Chychrun in Arizona. We have some developments there. Plus, we have updates from the NHL All-Star Game, updates on the Ottawa Senators, including their American Hockey League coach and the sale of the team, a few signings in Washington, and more. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade rumors to take a look at here today. Of course, the All-Star Game just wrapped up. We'll discuss that here in just a moment. First up, we have a couple of signings in the Washington Capitals organization. They picked up certainly a few players in free agency this year that have been good fits, and they've rewarded them with some contract extensions. Dylan Strome signs a 5-year deal with the Washington Capitals to remain there and making $5 million per season. That gives him a signing bonus each year of the contract of $2 million per year. It's not believed that there's any trade protection included in the contract. Strome's, like I said, has been a good fit there, putting up 36 points in 52 games. Certainly with a lot of their core players in the forward group, especially getting older, he could be a big piece for them moving forward. I mean, certainly they've had their fair share of injuries, but Ovechkin's still going pretty strong at his age. But you get Kuznetsov, you get Oshie, and a few others there. It's an older Capitals team. To have a younger player like Strome come in, be a good fit, it's certainly worked out quite nicely. And another player that seemed like nobody wanted, but has been a good fit there as well as Sonny Milano. Now, Milano's also been rewarded this time with an extension for 3 years. He gets a value of $1.9 million per season. So Milano and Strome both working out as free agent fines for the Capitals. Both get extensions here, confirmed within the last 24 hours or so. So that's good contracts for both. I think they're both, reasonably good fits with the team, and I like these contracts for both players. And now Milano had a stressful offseason, obviously not being able to get a full-time permanent contract. He ended up going on training camp on a PTO, didn't get signed, ended up going to Washington later, and now things are working out for him. It's hard to imagine why so many teams have given up on this player, because when he does land, he does seem to be still a very productive player who's worth having on your roster for sure. Some good signings there in Washington. Of course, the All-Star festivities have been this weekend with the skills competition going yesterday and the actual 3-on-3 tournament today. The Atlantic Division 1 to 3-on-3 tournament. Of course, the Atlantic battled the Metro and the battle of the Eastern Conference divisions. Then we saw the Pacific and the Central do battle in the Western Conference matchup with the Central and Atlantic both winning their first round matchups and then facing each other in the final. Of course, there is money on the line, even though it doesn't really mean a whole lot. Some of these players were trying. Some of them, you can tell, really weren't trying overly hard. And you kind of understand both sides of the equation there. Certainly, I'm sure that, they don't want to get hurt. At the same time, I'm sure they, some of them would probably rather be on a vacation, but some of them have to be there to represent. Some of them enjoy it. I'm sure there's a variety of opinions on the event across the league when it comes to the players. Hometown player Matthew Tkachuk had a heck of a game playing with his brother Brady, and of course won MVP for the day. So certainly Matthew Tkachuk, Brady Tkachuk, Mitch Marner, Nick Suzuki, they all had well. Dylan Larkin, another one for Team Atlantic, who had a real solid day in a couple of games there. So overall, the Atlantic team wins. We did also get confirmation from Gary Bettman in his address to the media that the next All-Star game next season for the 23-24 season will take place in Toronto. We had reported before, based on other reports, that it was looking that was going to be the case. Toronto is likely going to be the host for the World Cup of Hockey that was supposed to take place in 2024. Since that tournament has been put off, at least for the time being, for another year, they were reportedly going to be getting some sort of event to compensate for them not getting that, and an All-Star game seemed to be in the mix, and now that's confirmed. So we'll see next year in Toronto. Obviously, like I said, I don't know how players feel about it. I mean, Florida, obviously you got warm weather, the beach and all kinds of other things that are appealing for those who might want a winter vacation or a break from the cold, depending on where they live and where they play. Toronto is certainly not going to offer that next year, but certainly a huge fan base, and I have no doubt they'll have any issues selling out the arena and putting on a good show. But like I said, the All-Star Game is not for everybody. I really think the in-person experience is completely different than for those of us watching on TV. Very, very different scenarios from what I've heard. I mean, I haven't personally attended an All-Star Game, but I know from my talking to people who have, they certainly seem like it's a it's a whole different thing, especially if you get a chance to meet any players or just kind of see all these great players on the ice together at one given time. Now, there's also other reports that we've had some of these before, but it seems like it's getting more likely to, and closer to being confirmed. But it looks like the NHL very, very, very likely now will kick off next season, either preseason or beginning of regular season games to be held down under in Australia. Yes, the NHL wants to take the game and grow it globally. This is a place that we haven't really seen them venture to before. There was talk before, I believe it was a combination of Kevin Weeks and Elliot Friedman both talked about it in different reports here in the last number of weeks and months, saying that the NHL was kind of doing some research on the possibility of doing some games in Australia. And now I know the fourthperiod.com had information out on Twitter just a few hours ago saying that it looks like it's getting very close to being confirmed. And there's speculation that teams like Boston or Los Angeles might be the teams that end up going. Of course, that's not confirmed as I record this video. So certainly, we'll have to wait and see exactly when it gets confirmed, where the games will be in Australia. It's obviously a big country, big continent, lots of room there. And we'll have to find out which teams will go, and will it be preseason action or will it be the kickoff to the regular season like we've seen this year, which is not an unusual thing at all for the NHL to do that sort of thing. So we'll wait for further information, but certainly an interesting concept for sure. The NHL is interested in doing an outdoor game in Florida. Gary Bettman did mention that in his press conference as well. But obviously the weather being a major issue, it's debatable if it'll ever happen, but there's certainly interest, and they're, I guess, checking into it, researching, but it's very unlikely. I think they'll get it figured out, but you never know. Crazier things have happened. They have done them in other areas where the weather's warmer, so we'll see if they can get that figured out at some point. Update on the Ottawa Senators. We have two big pieces of news. One, Gary Bettman confirms that there is about 15 interested groups that are in the market here to buy the Ottawa Senators as that sale moves along in its process. He said bids should be coming through officially here soon. They've all been gone through the due diligence phase. And in the next couple of weeks, we should have a scenario where they're dealing with the banker that's involved to lead the sale from the Sens side. It should be kind of whittled down to a smaller group of bidders that'll be in the mix here to make the purchase actually take place. So we'll have to wait and see. He also did confirm, just in case there was anybody out there who did not have I guess confidence in it, because I've said it before, there was no chance, but the team is not being sold for the purpose of moving. All of these bidders are looking to buy and keep the team in Ottawa. The only chance of moving would be that they move to a new downtown arena, which that process has already been begun by the current ownership group and current leaders of the team as they go through this process here to get the new building downtown at LeBreton Flats as they go through that process with the city to get everything lined up to make that a reality, which will, hopefully in the next year or year and a bit that they'd have shovels in the ground if everything goes well. But the new ownership group has to take over first to be able to complete that process and make that a reality. So good news on that front. Lots of interested parties, just a matter of who's going to be the successful bidder. An odd scenario in Ottawa as well. This news actually came out late Friday night. I didn't have a news-based video yesterday as I was away, so I had a pre-recorded draft lottery simulation and mock draft that we talked about for the 2023 draft for yesterday's content. But an odd scenario happened late Friday night, about midnight my time, I think around 11 Eastern. We see news that the Ottawa Senators had announced that there was been changes to their coaching staff with the Belleville team in the American Hockey League, and that head coach Troy Mann had been relieved of his duties, and that just took the Ottawa fan base by shock and surprise. Troy Mann was an extremely well-respected coach. He'd been with the organization for an extended period of time. Yes, this current season in Belleville wasn't going overly well, but that had nothing to do with him as a coach. They had a ton of injuries and a ton of call-ups. Like, this team has not really been able to ice a consistent lineup in the least. They've had 5 different goaltenders. Like, that's not on him. And really, when they made the announcement, they didn't say really that it was performance-based from that perspective. They did make mention of the fact that they wanted systemic alignment between Belleville and Ottawa, and there appeared to be some differences. And then a little while later, we find out from TSN's Claire Hanna that she's been told by sources that there was some trust issues between the Senators and Troy Mann, and that it was believed that he had given or leaked pre-scouting information with other NHL teams. So it was based on the NHL Senators, not the AHL Senators, which is just a whole other bunch more questions. Like, one, why would he ever risk doing this? Because it's a career suicide. Like, do you really think he's going to get a job working at another NHL team if he was a trader with his existing franchise and got let go? Like, to me, that's a terrible idea from a variety of reasons. For starters, secondly, I have questions on why an AHL coach would even need information to that kind of access. Like, why would he need to know what their scouting reports are or pre-scouts on their upcoming games or plans for the NHL side of the business? There's no need of that. So why they would give him access, I don't know. Or did he actually have legit access, or was he somehow getting access to that in a way that he shouldn't have been? Another big question I can't answer today. Of course, his brother Trent is also the assistant general manager to Pierre Dorion. So that's going to be awkward, right? I mean, it's just really complicated. Now, of course, he's not the assistant GM that handles the AHL team. That's the other assistant GM, Ryan Bonus. Ryan Bonus did put out a quick clip that he was interviewed talking about the change, and just it said that, it's something that he understands, because obviously his dad is, Rick Bonus, the coach of the Winnipeg Jets. He said he grew up as the son of a coach, so he understands what it's like for coaches to be let go and changes to be made. And he obviously has, sympathetic feelings from them as a person and how it impacts the family and all those types of things. But that they felt it was a business decision that had to be made, and that, there were some differences that they had to move on, and that's all he was going to say. It's unlikely that the Senators have any additional press conference on this to talk about it. It's just really, really weird. I mean, you'd have to think that the information from TSN's Claire Hanna must have some merit to it, but at the same time, it's just really odd. So let me know what your thoughts are on that, and does it make any sense to you what happened there between Troy Mann and the Ottawa Senators management group? Now, onto the trade section of the day. We have a variety of things to take a look at. A lot of today's information comes from Frank Saravalli, but a little bit elsewhere as well. Let's kick things off with Jacob Chychrun. And of course, we know he's one of the top defensemen that's been in the trade rumor mill for some time. We don't know when a trade's going to happen, of course, but the latest rumblings do have him linked to teams like Boston or LA. Seems to be the two teams coming up the most when NHL insiders are hearing things about Chychrun. Doesn't mean he's going to end up going to either of those teams, of course, but they seem to be the teams getting the most mention from connected sources. But the other development today on the Chychrun front that has got people talking is that it appears as though he's removed reference to the Arizona Coyotes on his social media account. So that's certainly got people talking. I know there was some that noticed that he was following a lot of Toronto Maple Leaf players. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. He could be following a lot of NHL players. I personally haven't taken the time to go through and look at everybody he follows on social media. I don't have that much time on my hands, and I'm way too busy to do that, nor do I really care. So at the end of the day, he could have friends and colleagues and acquaintances across the NHL who he follows. I don't think it's going to give us any information on where he's being traded to, or even if a trade is actually imminent and going to happen. Maybe he just feels it's coming soon and wants to update his social media. We don't really know why he decided to make that update and remove the Coyotes from his profile. Now, could it mean a trade's coming? Maybe. It's not a guarantee. We can't say that with any certainty, but it's certainly getting a lot of people talking as we come out of the All-Star break. Could we see a deal in the next couple of days? Will it be LA? Could it be Boston? To me, Boston doesn't make sense for him. I think that other teams make more sense for Chychrun, for what the Coyotes are going to want. I don't know that Boston can really provide that. And secondly, if you look at their blue line, I'm not really sure that that's the area they're going to focus on for making upgrades ahead of the deadline. So I don't know. We'll see where he goes. LA does make some sense, but they have some other things, in my opinion, that they need to look at too. But they do have a lot of interesting young prospects that would intrigue the Coyotes, and they would be able to give a good price tag in that regard. So we'll see. Now, Frank Saravalli is also reporting that the St. Louis Blues have informed Ivan Barbashev that he's not going to be re-signed and that he's going to be traded, which is obviously not shocking news for sure, but it is kind of, I think, unusual at this point in the game, considering we're still a month from the deadline, to have players be told that. Now, his agent, Dan Milstein of Gold Star Sports, has actually come out and disputed that publicly on Twitter as well. So is Frank's reporting off? Is it a case of that fact that they just don't want this known, so they're disputing it? Certainly you would hope that from the Blues perspective, if they're going to let the player know that far ahead, that it could get leaked out. So I wouldn't think that would happen, but you never know. Players sometimes do know sooner than later that a new deal is not going to come, and a trade certainly is more likely. But Ivan Barbashev could be a really nice piece on teams contending for the Stanley Cup, for teams that want to shore up their middle six. He'd be a very intriguing player. I know he was a name that came up when it came to the Maple Leafs, looking at to kind of really secure their third line. He'd be a great addition there. I know I've seen his name mentioned when it comes to Vegas. And of course, the Mark Stone injury has taken place since then, so I don't know how that's going to impact things. If anything, it'll give them more flexibility with their cap if he's on LTIR the rest of the year, which is very likely, but still hard to say for sure. But do you think it's true that Ivan Barbashev is not going to be re-signed, and a trade is just a matter of time before the Blues move on from him? Now, staying with the Blues, there's word that their captain, Ryan O'Reilly, is getting interest from the Boston Bruins. Now, again, this is a player that's going to get interest from a variety of teams, and there's still some that think there's a chance, a small chance, that O'Reilly might re-sign with the Blues on a short-term contract. Now, I don't know that the likelihood of that is real high. It seems like from what we've heard that I think the likelihood of a trade is more likely, but it probably boils down to what Doug Armstrong sees as a reasonable deal for his current captain moving forward, since he needs a new contract. Now, obviously, O'Reilly is a player that was probably lumped into a lot of conversations with Bo Horvat. Not that O'Reilly's scoring is anywhere near what Bo was doing this season, but from a number two center standpoint, two-way play, strong defensively, all those things, they do share a lot of similar characteristics. And O'Reilly has scored at Horvat's level in the past. Now, Horvat's having a bit of an exceptionally odd season in a good way this year when it comes to his goal scoring, but historically speaking, he's not scored at that pace before, and I think there's a lot of comparisons can be made between the two players, so it makes sense that there's a lot of teams that would have interest in both guys. Now, of course, they seem to be at different parts of their career right now, O'Reilly being a little bit older, a little bit more on the decline, whereas Horvat really seems to take off this year, but I do think Horvat was also playing with extra motivation. There was reports that Horvat actually turned down a contract offer from Vancouver, being a 7-year range of around $7.5 million per season, that he wanted to bet on himself that he could do better than that. And we'll see what the Islanders end up doing for him, if indeed he does re-sign and remain with them on a long-term basis. But when it comes to Ryan O'Reilly, it's believed that the Bruins, now that Horvat's off the market, will turn their attention to more of a guy like O'Reilly and increase the potential there for a trade. I mean, the Bruins, it makes sense that they might want to add to their forward depth a little bit. I mean, they do have good depth down the middle, but they do have some aging veterans that are still playing at a high level. And then, of course, you can never have too much depth at that center position. Players can always be moved to the wing if need be. And if you have an injury later on, you can make some adjustments. But O'Reilly to the Bruins is not a done deal by any means, but he might be a player that's more reasonably priced for the Bruins to acquire than a guy like Horvat or some of the other guys that are expected to be on the market. But the interest is just there. Doesn't mean it's really gone any further than just kicking tires or making some initial inquiries on that front. Now, there's also been links from Frank Seravalli saying that Patrick Kane is a possibility to go to the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. We've talked lately about, different teams that have been in the mix on Kane. We've talked about the fact that there's some out there that think that Kane has hip issues, needs surgery, and that teams know this and may not trade for him at all. So is it possible that Kane, even if he wants to, does not get traded? It's always a possibility, I suppose. When it comes to the Leafs, though, I know the connection to Kane is not something that a lot of people are going to really take too seriously. I think the Maple Leafs have a variety of things they're considering, and it's not that it couldn't happen. It's just that, really, if you look at the Leafs' construction of their roster, I think there's really a number of different ways that Kyle Dubas could go, and a number of different players that would make sense for Toronto. Patrick Kane obviously is a dynamic player, solid on the wing, good playmaker, lots of experience, has Stanley Cups to his name. He could be a terrific addition with the leadership and just everything that team is looking for. Mark Giordano came in late last year, and he was a very positive influence and a good impact on that roster. And, Kane could end up doing the same thing. I don't see a long-term future for Kane in Toronto. Obviously, at the end of the day, Patrick Kane has full say over this. He has a full no-move clause. If he doesn't want to go to Toronto or anywhere else, he won't be, because at the end of the day, that's his call. So we'll see, even though Frank has talked about this recently in his programming, talking about how it's possible, I think it's probably slim that we see something like this take place. But one idea that he has talked about that seems to have a little bit more of a legit shot at happening, I think, is a potential blockbuster trade between the New York Rangers and the San Jose Sharks, possibly sending Timo Meier to the Big Apple. Now, of course, we know Meier is going to be another big trade target and is likely going to be dealt to a team who feels they can sign him long-term, or they could go the opposite route and use him as a rental. But I think the more likelihood is that he's traded to a team who can sign him, because I think the Sharks will get a much better return that way. If a team's getting him knowing he can't be re-signed and doesn't fit long-term into their plans, then it doesn't make sense. They're not going to offer as much of a package, right? So I think the Rangers will be better off, if they need to acquire this guy, that they want to sign him. They're not going to do it without locking him up on a long-term basis. But Frank Seravalli is reporting that not only the Rangers interested, but they've kind of circled him and locked him in as their top trade target for the upcoming deadline. And at the same time, they're also willing to give up significant pieces to make it happen. So obviously, we could be talking about a variety of players. We could be talking about Lafreniere. We could be talking about Capo Caco. We could be talking about Philip Hedl. Maybe Vitaly Kravtsov. Maybe one of their top prospects in Brennan Hoffman. It's all possible that a combination of those players could end up being on the table if it means landing Timo Meier. Now, if you look at their left wing depth, there's already a difficult, path for a lot of players to get a lot of ice time and really work their way up the charts, like Lafreniere, for example, with Panarin and Kreider already there. I mean, Meier is versatile, can probably play either wing, and they might have to do that if they're going to go down this road. But at the end of the day, I have to think that, a guy like Lafreniere, Brennan Hoffman might be the more intriguing pieces there for the Sharks. But it's also known that Chris Drury, the GM of the Rangers, and Mike Greer, the new GM of the Sharks, have a long-standing friendship. They've known each other for years and years and have a very close relationship. And obviously, will likely have an easy time talking, negotiating where they are close. So certainly it makes sense that the conversations would make sense for the Rangers side. They do have a lot of assets to make the deal work. And it does make a ton of sense. Now, don't be surprised if you see New Jersey's name mentioned a lot in Meier as well. We've talked about that a few times. It's believed that Tom Fitzgerald has a ton of interest in this player as well, and he has publicly made it known that a top 6 forward is at the top of his wish list. We just can't say for certain that Meier's his guy, but based on all the accounts of what we've heard from NHL reporters and what we know that Meier is and the fit and the connections, it makes a lot of sense that he would make a great fit there long term as well. So to me, there's a really good chance he ends up in that part of the U.S. It's just a matter of what team does he go to. Will he be playing in the Big Apple or will he be playing in Jersey? Let me know your thoughts on all that and more down in the comments. We'll discuss further. Of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.